Alright, this is the second video I've done on addressing present truth in Adventism. The first one was over 2 years ago, and it's probably worth your time if you haven't seen it. It's an old video now, for me anyway, a couple years. There it is. Stop by, go look at it, and see it. Now, in Defeating Adventism number 119, where the so-called resurrection of Moses, I indicated I was going to do a video on Jude 3 and present truth. Because as I was reading all those Jude passages to refute the silly Adventist concept of a resurrected Moses. By the way, Adventists don't even know where that verse comes from in Jude 9. It comes from the assumption or the testament of Moses. It's not an actual recorded event, but go watch Defeating Adventism number 119 for that. But as I'm reading that, and I'm reading Jude 3, I'm going, wow, Jude 3 just delivers a knockout punch to Adventism and this doctrine of theirs they call present truth. Well, anyway, that time's arrived. That video's here, and now here it is. So the biblical text, like I said, of Jude 3 is going to annihilate this whole idea of Adventism's present truth and their false three angels, everlasting gospel, twice cursed message, which you will see here over and over and over. So anyway, let's get started. Let's read Jude 3 first to set the course for this video. Jude, look, it's a judgment on false teachers. Beloved, although I was eager to write to you about our common salvation, which he didn't write about, something else happened. And he said, I found it necessary to write to you, appealing to you to contend for the faith that was once and for all delivered to the saints. That's what we're going to talk about. The faith, contend for that faith that was once and for all delivered to the saints. We're going to define those terms. So Jude 3 is, like I said, is going to decimate the Seventh-day Adventist doctrine of present truth and their false, cursed, three angels messages. First, before we do that, I'm going to let Adventism define present truth for us. I did it in my other video by looking at the actual present truth newspaper, which, again, go look at Defeating Adventism 27 for that one. We're going to look at this Adventist encyclopedia. Here it is in the, I think it's a 10-volume set, because this is volume 10, where they actually define present truth. By the way, we're going to look at a couple other resources. The next one we're going to look at is this Vine's Expository Lexicon Dictionary of the New and Old Testament, as well as the Lowe and Nita Greek-English lexicon, because original languages are devastating to Seventh-day Adventism, and they're going to be devastating here. Anyway, we're going to let Seventh-day Adventists tell us what this doctrine of theirs called present truth actually is. So let's look here. There's that same volume 10 of the encyclopedia, 1976. And what's it say here? Present truth. You can see in the red text. It's a phrase from 2 Peter 1:12. Yeah, it is. It's a phrase. Then look at the blue text. The expression present truth implies truth that is peculiarly appropriate in the present historical situation. Oh, it's changing. And then they say, in a similar sense, in the green text, they tell us present truth is what the three angels' message is one of their present truths. And we're going to continue reading down in this column. And let's read the next piece at the bottom. That James White broadened the meaning of this term when he wrote in the first issue of the first periodical, that's the Present Truth newspaper. Again, you can go look at Defeating Adventism 27, where I show that newspaper. And then they quote James White, and you can see in the red text beneath it there, it says, it's truth applicable to the present time. Once again, so it's truth as a moving target. And then look at the green underline, which we're going to continue on the next slide. The church have ever had a present truth. The present truth now is that which shows present duty and the right position for us. So it's truth changing for the time. And Ellen White wrote, the doctrines we hold today are present truth. And then, i.e., the whole, and she talks about embracing the whole gospel. There it is, present truth, defined by Adventists for us in their own encyclopedia and their own commentary set. So now we see what it means. Let's take that phrase present truth that they defined in 2 Peter 1:12, and here's what Adventism does. They read it in, and they have to read it in the King James Bible, by the way. And they read it and they pour their own meaning into it. Here's what Adventists don't do. Adventists are horrible at this. That's why they got so many false doctrines. They don't look at the phrase in the Bible, present truth, and say, huh, what does the actual Greek text mean? Let's open up some Greek and English lexicons and learn from that. No. Silly Adventism. They'll look at a phrase in a 400-year-old translation. By the way, use the King James when you have discussions with people who are 400 years old. That's when you should use this Bible. But anyway, Adventism uses and pour their own meaning to it. So here's what we're going to do. Adventism just told us present truth it's a truth that's changing over time. It's a truth that is applicable to a specific era, to a specific time. Okay, is that what the Greek text means? If I look up the Greek word for present truth, is that what it's going to tell you? Let's test that out. We're going to let the actual Greek, the original language of the Bible, test Adventism. Let's see if they're right or not. Here is the actual verse for present truth, and you can see the Greek text. That's the Strong's reference. I circled there. Parime and Strong's 3918. Keep that in mind. Here we go to that Vine's Expository Dictionary I told you about. By the way, I love to use Adventist-approved citations, and Adventists have used this 10 times, starting in 1959 to 2010. So we're going to find that Strong's reference. You remember that reference I pointed out to you? There it is, 3918, Parime, and the red text says what? Present truth means such things as ye have. Not what you already got. And then it says literally the things that are present. Okay? Right, the things that are present. Then it goes 2 Peter 1:12. It speaks of the truth which is with you. Read the next part carefully, not as the KJV, the present truth, as if of some special doctrines applicable to a truth, doctrines of a particular time. Oh, wow, and there it is, pow! The Vine's Expository Dictionary just absolutely smacked Seventh-day Adventism around and said this 400-year-old translation, if you're reading it and you're thinking present truth is truth for a particular time, they said, no, sorry, it's not. It's the truth that is with you. The original language of the Bible once again refutes Seventh-day Adventism. Vine's, which you just read, has corrected the KJV translation and said, it's a poor rendering, it's what it is. So the Adventist definition of present truth, what they told us, it doesn't match, it's not what the Greek word means. They've taken a 400-year-old Bible translation and poured their own meaning into the word, which is not the original Greek word. Greek, again, Hebrew and Aramaic, I have done already, refutes Adventism. What if Adventism was to read a different translation? Do all translations say present truth? Because they build a doctrine on a translation. Here are some translations. The Douay Rheims, first one on the top. Oh, it has present truth. Hey, Adventists, you agree with the Catholics. Bravo for you. Give the Adventists a clap. Yay. But look at all the other ones. The ESV, the Good News, the ISV, the Lexham, the Revised Version. Look at it. The truth you have. The truth you now have. In the truth you have. Well, okay, Adventists, you're doing really good because you agree with the Catholics. No, it doesn't mean a truth that's ever changing. The SDA concept of present truth is simply untrue, not supported by the Greek. By the way, does truth change? Does truth change? In modern society, we've been dealing with this now for decades. We have this concept called relativism, sometimes called cultural relativism. Let me explain it to you here briefly. Cultural relativism, if you haven't heard it, you've definitely encountered it. And some of you may even actually believe it. Cultural relativism means there is no absolute universal truth on anything, anywhere. Truth is resonant within each person. It's a preference. Now, as some of you already know, I teach business courses at a college. And at one point in time, we're going to get into in business ethics and ethical behavior in business. Well, ethics demands truth. There's a right and there's a wrong, and it's a universal truth. I love it when I'm in the classroom and I do this. I'll ask my students. I'll say, okay, who here believes that absolute truth does not exist? I will always get a few brave souls to raise their hand in the class. When I do, then I'll ask them. I'll say, okay, so you are absolutely sure, you are absolutely certain that absolute truth does not exist. And usually the rest of the class starts laughing because they get it. Because those that raise their hand that say it's an absolute truth, that absolute truth doesn't exist, have just stated an absolute truth. They say your argument just committed, or your philosophy just committed suicide in front of us in the classroom. Done. Anyway, it's kind of funny. So Adventism has its own relativism. I call Adventism theological relativism, where Adventism believes that they have this truth. Other churches don't have it. Maybe they can get it, but they don't have it. They've got this truth that the apostate Christian churches, second angel's message, don't have. So Adventists, you are theological relativists. You're relativists. By the way, how can a present truth given in 1844, the three angels' messages, be in the Bible? It can't. Because the Bible was written well before 1844. So if you have as a doctrine, present truth, three angels' messages, by definition it's not in the Bible. Because it's a doctrine that came after the canon was closed. Just doesn't exist. Every single present true doctrine of Adventism, by definition, is not in the Bible. Because it can't be there. Because it came 1800 years after Christ. Okay, let's read a quote about present truth from somebody that ought to know better. A former president of yours in one of your Adventist Review magazines. Look with me here. And his name is what? Robert Fulkenberg. And there it is, October of 1995. And what does he say about present truth? As Seventh-day Adventists, we believe we have a present truth message found in the proclamation of the three angels' messages. There we go. A present truth message is the three angels' messages, which means it's not in the Bible because it came 1800 years after the Bible was closed. And then at the very bottom it says, this is a distinct message for a distinct time. He defined present truth correctly. I would expect him to. He's a president. In fact, he says that this message is for our time. In fact, which is why we deem it present truth. So when he says a distinct message for a distinct time, he means this message is not in the Bible. It's a modern truth. And a modern truth, by definition, is not in the Bible. Because the Bible was already done before this modern truth was delivered. Present truth is truth with a small t, not a capital T. Present truth in Adventism means truth with a capital T is a moving target. Truth is never stable. It moves. So, just to recap, you've already seen that the Greek text for present truth doesn't mean what the SDAs teach. Not at all. Now that we know the SDA doctrine of present truth is a doctrine not supported by the Greek language, Jude is going to continue to refute this silly concept of present truth. You're going to see Jude is just going to absolutely devastate it. Jude 3 states in part, to contend for the faith that was once and for all delivered to the saints. Contend. The word contend, and I decided not to make a slide for it, so I don't make too many slides. But contend is a physical exercise term. It's a struggle. So Jude is saying contend. You're going to fight, you're going to struggle. Not fight, with swords, but it's going to be a struggle. You're going to contend for the faith that was delivered to the saints. Contend for the faith. What is the faith that Jude is saying to contend for? Let me show you right here. Colossians 1:23. I could show you many examples, but I'm just going to show you a couple. If indeed you continue in the faith, there it is, stable and steadfast, not shifting from the hope of the gospel. The faith is the gospel. Here it is, because there's one body. There's one spirit, just as you were called. There's one Lord, one faith, one baptism. The faith that Jude is mentioning in Jude 3, the faith is the gospel. Read this here now. Galatians 1:11 through 23. I'm just going to read the red text for you. This is Paul talking about being called by God. Galatians 1:11 and 12 are really important. Let's read those. For I would have you know, brothers, that the gospel that was preached by me is not man's gospel. For I did not receive it from any man, nor was I taught it. I received it through a revelation of Jesus Christ. Did you catch that in verse 12? The gospel that Paul received, that he is preaching, he received after Christ was crucified. The gospel message Christians preach is the gospel message that was received by Paul after Christ's crucifixion. Verse 16. And Paul is talking of God, that God was pleased to reveal his Son to him, in order that he might preach him among the Gentiles. Verse 23. Now, Paul's talking about what others are saying about him. They say, hey, this is Paul. This is the guy, he who used to persecute us is now preaching the faith. And what is the faith? Go back and read 11 and 12 verses. It's the gospel that he once tried to destroy. The early church preached, that's what they preached. They preached about Christ's death, burial, and resurrection. That was it. That's what they preached. The gospel. So when you see the faith, it's the gospel. When Jude says that in verse 3, in Jude 3, contend for the faith, he's telling them, you contend for the gospel. And the gospel message, as we're going to see here in a minute, is the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ. So anyway, let me just say this for the benefit of those that may not have seen some other videos that I've done on the gospel. Let's look at what the gospel is. Here is the gospel message. You read where the gospel came from in Galatians. Keep that in mind. Let's read this. Verse 1. Now I would remind you, brothers, of the gospel I preached to you, which you received, in which you stand, and by which you are being saved. Oh, this is important now. This is the saving gospel. No other gospel. This is the saving gospel here in verse 2. And then he goes on to say, if you hold fast to the word I preached to you, unless you believe in vain. For I delivered to you as of first importance what I also received. You just read where he received it from. He received it from the resurrected Christ. And what did he receive? He received this here. That Christ died for our sins, and according with the Scriptures, that he was buried, that he was raised on the third day, according to the Scriptures. Now, does the Seventh-day Adventist present truth gospel, do they preach this biblical gospel as defined above? Well, we're going to let them explain that to us. And we're going to look at a fairly recent magazine. Here's May 2021 on page 21. Let's look at the red box and what's it say. Here it is, the everlasting gospel in blue. And there's Revelation 14:6, everlasting gospel. And it says, this gospel undergirds all aspects of the three angels' messages. Okay, well, what are those messages? The judgment hour. Well, that's 1844. Investigative judgment begins. Worship of the Creator. Babylon's fall. That means get out. That's the Adventist message of get out of apostate Sunday churches. Mark of the beast. Well, that's what Sunday keepers are going to get if they're still worshiping on Sunday. And the commandments of God and the faith in Jesus. There's the Seventh-day Adventist gospel message right there. Albeit in a very short form, but that's the Seventh-day Adventist gospel message. And by the way, where are these messages in the Bible? Where is the Bible say 1844 in the judgment hour? I've looked all through my Bible. 1844 is not there. I got page 1844, but I don't have 1844 judgment hour. Where does it say that Sunday keepers are going to get the mark of the beast sometimes? Etc., etc., etc. This present truth, gospel message Adventism preaches is not in the Bible. So, this SDA gospel is not a gospel that's in the Bible. There's the gospel that's in the Bible. Death, burial, and resurrection of Christ. There's the SDA gospel. You got some fake investigative judgment Levitical priest Jesus showing up, moving apartments. He had to call the movers and help him because he moved from one place to another. And then the SDA say, get out of Babylon, get out of the false Sunday churches, because if you stay there, you're going to get the mark of the beast, and you got to keep the commandments of God, etc. Well, you know what? If you preach another gospel, Seventh-day Adventists, you're cursed. Galatians 1. I'm astonished that you are so quickly deserting him who called you in the grace of Christ and are turning to a different gospel. Not that there is another one, but there are some who would trouble you and want to distort the gospel of Christ, like Seventh-day Adventists. And verse 8, but even if we, or an angel, or three angels, from heaven even, should preach to you a gospel contrary to the one that we preach, which you just saw in 1 Corinthians 15, let him be cursed. As we said before, I say again, if anyone is preaching to you a gospel contrary to the one you receive, let him be cursed. That's two curses. Seventh-day Adventists, you are double cursed for your false three angels gospel. So, review again. The Greek text does not support this idea of Seventh-day Adventism and their present truth. One of the present truth messages is the three angels gospel. False gospel. A gospel created in 1844 by definition is not in the Bible. Unless you want to say the Bible was canonized after 1844, then perhaps you can. So, when Jude now demands Christians to contend for the faith, it is a command to contend for the gospel. Because there are false gospels out there, like the SDA Three Angels Gospel, which is twice cursed, by the way, as you just saw. Lastly, Jude describes the faith that was once and for all delivered to the saints. Let's look at that here. So now we know when Jude says, contend for the faith, he's talking about the gospel. And now we know what the gospel is. And Seventh-day Adventist doesn't have it. And then he's talking about, and that this faith was, this gospel was once and for all delivered to the saints. Here it is in the Greek. Was once for all. Apex. And we're going to look now in this Lo and Nita Greek and English lexicon, which is again Seventh-day Adventist approved because they love to quote it, primarily in Ministry Magazine. Let's look here at the page. Red text. It's a single occurrence to the exclusion of any other similar occurrence. So once and for all means once and never again. Look at the blue text. The faith given once and for all to God's people. What is the faith? The faith is the gospel. And when Jude 3 says it was given once and for all, the faith is, that's the message. The gospel message of Christ's death, burial, and resurrection has been given to the people once and for all. There is no other faith. There is no other message. The faith in Jude 3 is the gospel. The saints are to contend for this gospel against false gospels, like Seventh-day Adventism, Jehovah's Witnesses, and Mormons, etc. So the faith that was once and for all delivered to the saints, meaning the faith has been. That's it. Did you catch that? Has been. And you saw in the Greek, it's delivered once, it's one and done. That's it. And that's true. We have the faith. We have the gospel. It has been delivered. There is no other gospel. There is no other present truth for the time because the faith has been delivered. Done. There's no concept in the Bible of truth as a moving target or truth as a small t. So Jude 3 is a warning against false teachers who preach a message of faith, gospel, who preach a gospel different than the faith already received, and which is not going to be received again, as you saw in the Greek of Lo and Nita. The faith has been delivered. The gospel has been delivered. Done. Message sealed. Not to be changed. Adventism, that's why Jude 3 annihilates Seventh-day Adventism. Adventism proclaims a twice cursed gospel of three messages as its present truth, which truth is a moving target with a small t. You know what? But you know what's absolutely clear? Jude 3 says it's the faith that has been forever and once, never to be repeated, given to the saints. Period. See how Jude 3 just refuted Seventh-day Adventism. Closing slide here. And if our gospel is veiled, and it is veiled to those who are perishing, Seventh-day Adventists. In their case, the God of this world has blinded the minds of Adventists, you are unbelievers, to keep them from seeing the light of the gospel of the glory of Christ. Amen. Who is the image of God. For what we proclaim is not ourselves, but Christ Jesus as Lord, with ourselves as your servants for Jesus' sake. For God, who said, let light shine out of darkness, has shone in our hearts, give the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ. Seventh-day Adventists, you are not Christians. Present truth does not exist. It is a false doctrine. One of your present truth doctrines is the three angels' messages, which is in... And I'll say it again, I'll be very clear. None of the messages of the three angels are found in the Bible. It's a false gospel. You are twice cursed. So when Jude 3 was writing to the saints to contend for the faith, to contend for the gospel that has been once and finally, forever delivered to the saints. That's what we are doing right here, right now to you. Repent and get out of this false religion.